It is great to see you. My name is Mike. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're just honored that you would come and hang out with us. Could I talk about next week for just a minute? I know you heard a little bit about it, but I want to let you know that next week will be the start of a significant series for us. We're beginning a series called Elephant in the Room, and there's a graphic for you. It's a public conversation on what we talk about in private. And so next week, we're going to talk about sex and intimacy. And so it is sort of an older adult maybe conversation. And so if you have fifth grade and under that usually join you in this service, we would encourage you to have them go to the family area, and they're going to love our family experience with the kids across the way. If you want them to be in here, we just wanted to prep you for that. We really believe it'll be an appropriate conversation and a safe conversation and be able to help you have some great conversations for the rest of the week. So that starts next week. And one of the best ways that you can engage in a series like this is through a connection group. We have connection groups that meet all throughout the week. We have over 40 groups that would love to invite you to come and hang out with them. You can sign up for one of those groups in the lobby today. And if you're a group host, all the material for that will be available for you next week. There'll be discussion questions, there'll be material that you can read, and most importantly, there'll be some things that you could hear from Jesus. And so we're excited about this series, and I want to invite you to come back and invite some friends to be a part of this series, Elephant in the Room. And speaking of elephant in the room, we have to go back to last week for a moment. Because last week was Easter, and it was one of the best Easters that this church has ever had. How many were here with us at Easter last week? I just want to run through just a couple of stats for you. It was the largest attended Easter in the history of our church. We had almost 2,500 people on our campus last week. Yeah. We had almost 400 kids come and join us in our kids area, and get this, we prepared for that a few weeks before by having some extra rooms, and we're using those extra rooms regularly now, and we filled those rooms up too. So those of you that are having kids, stop. No, I'm kidding. But we filled those rooms up, and we're so excited that people came and brought their families, and we're hoping they would continue to come. And then the best part was seeing almost 300 volunteers step up and serve with us last week. So we had volunteers in this service, we had volunteers in the kids area, we had volunteers all over the place. And if you were a volunteer, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for helping us be a place that has arms wide open for people in our community and in our city. The best stat that I could give you for last week, though, was the 54 baptisms that took place. That was a spectacular, spectacular day. And you know what was meaningful for me? I had a different experience. I was able to be backstage and watch people come through. And what was meaningful for me was to watch those that I've seen get baptized in the last 3 years really love and encourage those who were getting baptized that day. It was powerful. In fact, we have counted now 514 baptisms since 2014 at this church. That doesn't happen. I just want you to know, that is not happening anywhere. That is a miracle from God, and you are a part of what God is doing here at Active Church. So let's celebrate one more time what God is doing here. And I realize that on a Sunday like that, it can be significant for you. It can be life-changing for you. And maybe for you, it was you just accepted an invitation. You just showed up. And I want you to know that that's a great decision. Maybe for you, you were somebody that actually gave an invitation to somebody. And I want you to know that that's a great decision. Maybe you decided to grow up in your faith and you were somebody that was baptized. And I just want to say to those that showed up, all the way to those that growed up, all right? And I know my English is off there, but showed up to growed up, all right? I have 2 words for you. Great work. Great work. I know often we may feel like those small moments where we're making decisions, they don't feel significant, they don't feel powerful, they don't feel like they're life-changing, but you know and I know that when you reach life change, it takes a lot of small moments to get there, doesn't it? It takes a lot of small decisions that we may feel like they're small, but they're actually big, significant, life-changing decisions. And so great work. Making those decisions from growing up to showing up to being a part of what God is doing here at this church. As a family, we participate in 4 things when we actually experience something great. And so my wife and I and our kids will always sit down, normally at the dinner table, and we'll talk about what we've just been through. And when Easter finished and we got home, we had a moment where we did 4 things and we asked 4 questions. The first thing that we always do is we celebrate. We always celebrate. And I'm good at celebrating. I bust out the chocolate milk, and we have Oreos, and we celebrate. And when we celebrate, we ask the question, well, what happened? What took place? Why are we celebrating this? The next thing that we do is we evaluate. We evaluate what took place. What decisions did I make? And so we talked to our kids about, they were involved in every service and were serving, and so we talked about what moments did you make decisions and got involved, and we were able to evaluate what God did in and through us. The third thing we do is we prepare. We prepare. We ask the question, what will I do? Because we understand, and I think you understand, that when something significant happens, it makes it even more significant when you make the next decision, right? When you make the next choice, when you continue to move forward. And so as a family, we ask the question, what will I do? And then finally, we ask all those questions, and the last thing we do is we activate. Did you see what I did there? We activate, all right? And we ask the question, how will I do it? How will I do the next thing for us? Because remember, it's not about making one decision. It's about a consistent moment of decision. It's about a consistent weeks of decision. It's about saying yes to something continuously. And when it comes to following God, when it comes to pursuing God, we understand that it's important not to just make one decision, but a continuous decision. And here's what we've understood as a family, and here's what we're understanding as a church, is that growth, it doesn't happen on accident. Growth is the result of decisions made on purpose. Growth is the result of decisions made on purpose. And I love my family because we get to process these things together. I love the leaders of this church because we get to process these things together. And we get to hear the good and the bad and the ugly. We get to celebrate and activate together. And one of the things that we're continuing to learn at this church and in our family is this, that in order to build something great, you need more than you. In order to build something great, you need more than you. I mean, think about the moments where you were courageous and you were bold. Legendary stories never start while I was sitting at home playing my Xbox, right? Most of the stories that you tell, you're able to turn to somebody and go, hey, remember when, and before you can even begin the story, they start to crack up, they start to laugh, or they start to cry because it was a powerful, life-changing, legendary story. Courage and boldness begins when we first turn to God and then turn to another. When we know that we're building something great and it begins with us pursuing God because He first pursued us, and then we turn to the people that are supportive of that love us, that will point us back to Jesus. I heard a great story last week of a wife and a husband were sitting in this service, and Ian's preaching, and he's inviting people to get baptized, and he does the 1, 2, 3, and in that moment, there's this wife, she said, I felt God stirring in my heart, and I felt God speaking to my mind, and she said it wasn't just an audible voice, it was just a moment where I just felt God going, it's time for you to get baptized. And so she said, and privately, silently to God, yes, I'm going to do this. And then she turned to her husband, and she said her husband turned to her, and they had this moment where they didn't use words, they just had the wink and the nod and the nudge. And for those of you that have been in a relationship for a long time, maybe those that are married, you know what I'm talking about. You can speak language without even speaking. You just go, you know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, got it. I'm going to pay that bill. So this was that moment that they had. And so she turns to her husband, he turns to her, and he just goes. And so she starts taking off her rings and pulls out all of her jewelry and gives it to him, and she gets up and she's crying and she comes back. It was a powerful moment. Why? Because she first leaned into what God wanted, and then she leaned into the people that were around her, and she trusted them. And here's what I know is true about me, and I believe is true about you. We want to do those things again, and we want to feel those things again. It's important for us to experience what God is doing in our hearts and in our lives. And it's important for us to feel what God is doing in our hearts and in our lives. So again, we want to do those things again. We want to feel those things again. And maybe for you, Easter Sunday was a significant day. You showed up for the very first time in a long time, or the very first time in forever. And the walls are still standing. Fire did not come down from heaven. And nobody looked at you and went, I smell atheist. You know what I mean? You came in, you were able to be a part of this. Nobody went on Facebook to check your background. You were able to be a part of this, and hopefully, and I believe you felt loved and encouraged, and you were a part of something great. Maybe for you, you made a decision on a Sunday where you said, I'm going to say yes to God, and I'm going to say no to this. And you know what happens when we make those decisions? Monday comes. Monday comes. And when Monday comes, everything that we've said yes to lean into God, all of those things are still fresh. But you know what gets really loud on Mondays? All of the things that we've said no to. Maybe on Sunday you said, I'm going to be committed to this marriage. We've had tension, we've had issue, and I'm going to be committed to it. And then Monday you woke up and you rolled over and you went, because you felt the tension, you felt the temptation, you felt the issue rise up. Man, Sundays can be great, but Mondays can be tough, can't they? And sometimes I believe that we think that our one decision on Sunday is going to help us throughout the whole week, when in reality it's consistent decisions. When you're building something great with great people, it's making consistent decisions to pursue God every day that changes everything for you. And this is why I love the Bible. I love the Bible because the Bible is honest about that. The Bible is honest about its people. The Bible is honest about God. It's about real people interacting with a real God and trying to figure out this real relationship. And this morning, what I want to do is just spend a moment talking about one particular person in the Bible. His name is Nehemiah, and this is a most recent selfie from his Instagram page. And Nehemiah, I'm sorry, that's funny. Okay, and Nehemiah lived around the year 444 BC, way before even Jesus walked this earth. And Nehemiah was under the rule of a man named Artaxerxes, and he was taken from his homeland. In fact, his family was taken from his homeland, and they lived in another country. And so he began to live and move and breathe in a different environment, but he had a longing for where he was from. To help you understand this, let's pretend for a moment that Canada invaded the United States of America, and that they came to, and for those that are from Yucaipa, they came to Yucaipa and they took your family out of Yucaipa forcefully and brought you back to Montreal. And so the rest of your life and what you know is maple syrup, Canadian bacon, and hockey. That's all you know. Now for some of you, you're like, that's not so bad. For others of you, you're like, I think I just threw up a little bit in my mouth. Now, as silly as this sounds, let's continue with it for a moment. You begin, as you are being raised in this new environment, you begin to hear about your hometown. And let's say you're from Yucaipa. You begin to hear that the roundabouts have been destroyed. And there's chaos on Yucaipa Boulevard. Travel has come to a standstill. Now, as silly as that story is, the truth is for Nehemiah, he hears about his hometown, Jerusalem. And he hears about how it's been destroyed. What's interesting is he never lived there. His family did, but he was born in what they would call exile. And as he began to hear about his hometown, he began to have a stirring in his heart to do something great. And he had great people around him. And he began to have a conversation first with God and then with other people about going back to his hometown to protect it. And what happened in Jerusalem is not unusual during that time. Those cities, those ancient cities, would be protected by some sort of barrier, some sort of wall. And the walls of Jerusalem have been taken down, and so people would come to Jerusalem and take advantage of the city, of the people, of the economic status of the city. They would steal, they would kill, they would destroy. And as these stories got back to Nehemiah, he began to have heartbreak. And he knew that there was something that he should do. And his role in this kingdom was to be a cupbearer for the king. And what that basically means is anything that the king was about to drink, Nehemiah would drink first in case it had poison. You thought your job was bad. Nehemiah would test it, and if he didn't die, then he would pass it along to the king. Well, this role had earned him the right to be heard by the king. They had a pretty special relationship. And so Nehemiah begins to pray to God and ask God for direction, and part of that direction was to go to the king and ask for permission to go to Jerusalem. And in this world, you just don't ask the king for permission. You just don't speak to the king unless you're spoken to. And you carry yourself with joy, not with a countenance that's depressed. But he walked into this environment where the king was depressed and broken. And so the king asked, Nehemiah, what's wrong with you? And he began to tell him the story about his hometown and how God was building something great in him and building something great with people and how he wanted to go back. And the king said, I'll grant your request. I'll provide you everything that you need. I'll make you mayor of Jerusalem. I just have one caveat to that. One condition, that you need to come back when it's finished, because he loved Nehemiah. And so Nehemiah goes, this is fantastic. And he does something that is so powerful in this story. He casts a great vision to the people. He doesn't just gather people and go do a good work. He sits them down and he says to them, here's why we should do it, and here's why we should do it right now. And people started going, yes, this is what we want. This is who we are. This is the steps that we need to take. Nehemiah, we're on the team. And so they head back to Jerusalem, and they begin to build this wall. And you and I both know that when great work is taking place, there's always opposition, right? Whenever there's something great happening, there are always those that will try to stand against it. And in Nehemiah's day, he began to get enemies. One of the enemies was a guy named Sanballat. Another enemy was a guy named Geshem. And they were feeling threatened by what Nehemiah was doing. They thought perhaps Jerusalem would get strong and they would lose their authority. They thought perhaps Jerusalem would get mighty and they would be pushed to the outskirts of town. And so they began to do everything they can to stop Nehemiah in his tracks. The great work and the great people that are doing the great work, they did everything they can to stop. It was as if Nehemiah was having a Sunday and Sanballat and Geshem were the Monday. And we reach the pinnacle of this story in Nehemiah chapter 6, starting in verse 1. If you want to turn there in a Bible or if you have a phone, it'll also be up on the screen. But there's something in this story that I want you to hang on to. In fact, I would say this, and we don't use this language often around here. There is a principle in this story that Nehemiah practices that you must do. Not should, could, possibly, think about it, consider it. I want to encourage you to think through the lens of, I must do this. Because I believe if you do this, it will change everything for you. I know that's big language, and we don't use that often around here. But I want you to see what this must actually looks like. So here's the pinnacle, the crescendo of the story. In Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1, it says this: when the word came to Sanballat that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. And this was the message. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. Now they're his enemy. They're standing against him. And there's something great that Nehemiah is doing with great people. And they send this message to Nehemiah to say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. But Nehemiah understood that there was more to this letter than meets the eye. The very next verse says this: but they were trying to harm me. They were trying to harm me. Now, we have a phrase around here. It's kind of a phrase that we use in jest. It's a phrase that we laugh at. And it's a phrase that if you want to adopt, you're more than welcome to adopt. But when you're doing something great, there always will be opposition. And so a phrase that we use around here is this one: they hate us because they ain't us. Now, I know I sound ultra white when I say that, so I get that that's probably not a phrase that you would normally hear from me. But we use this phrase as a way of joking, as a way of jesting, because we understand that when something great is happening, there will always be things that will come against it. And for Sanballat, he did 3 specific things to Nehemiah. The first thing that he did is he would spread rumors. The next thing that he did is he would make threats. One of the last things that he did is he would mock Nehemiah and the workers on the wall. So let's talk about the rumors for a moment. Let's talk about these rumors. And here's what I need you to know. With rumors, there will always be talk. There will always be gossip. And you don't have to address it at all. Often, we feel like we have to respond to everything that's out there. And let me just say this very clearly. You don't have to. You don't have to respond to anything. When gossip and rumors are out there, you don't even have to acknowledge the gossip and rumors, because that's exactly what they are. I had a mentor of mine say a long time ago that rumors are like tumors. They grow quietly in you, and you're not sure that they're there until they show themselves after it's too late. You don't have to respond to the rumors. You don't have to respond to the gossip. In fact, we're encouraged by somebody who spent a lot of time with Jesus. His name was Peter. We're encouraged not to respond verbally to that. Look what Peter says. He says, "Be careful how you behave among your neighbors, for then even if they are suspicious of you and talk against you, they will end up praising God for your good works when Christ returns." The loudest voice is the one that chooses to be silent and allow their life to speak loud, and allow their life to be the example. I know that's hard, especially in a social media world, and especially when you get tagged in a post that you don't want to be tagged in, especially when somebody just blows you up. I know that this is hard and that this is difficult, but there is a verse in Proverbs that I have adopted personally, and I'm going to paraphrase it for you. And somebody in my life gave me this verse years ago, and the verse kind of goes like this: "Even a fool knows when to keep quiet." There are times where I know that I could respond and I could say some really great things, but my silence spoke louder because I want my life to tell the story. And when there's rumors and when there's gossip, your life speaks louder than your words. Let's talk about threats, because there will always be risks. Whenever you're building something great with great people, there will always be risks in building. You're now a Christian. You're now doing this or that. You're now involved. You go to church. There will always be those who will, "I don't know if I want to be near you anymore. I don't know if I understand this completely." And when the threats come, what we need to understand that may be more about them than it is about you. And our job isn't to figure them out. Our job is to love them. Our job is to care for them. Our job is to show the same mercy that we have been shown. There will always be risks, and it was Jesus that actually addressed this. Jesus said this in John, in a letter called John chapter 16. "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." Maybe you don't believe the Bible at all, but you know what? We can all believe this, right? In this world you will have trouble, but take heart that Jesus Christ has overcome the world. And the last thing, they would mock and ridicule Nehemiah and the people that were working on this wall. And there will always be hate. There will always be those that stand against you. And using the words of Peter again, in 1 Peter chapter 4, he says this: "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins." The response to hate is love. The response to ridicule is love. The response to somebody standing against you is love. Why? Because that's what you're building your life on. The love that you don't define, the love that's been defined by Jesus. That's what you're building your life on. And if you really want them to understand what it is that you're doing, then show them by how you're living. And Nehemiah understood this. Because we read in Nehemiah chapter 6 that he said this after they mocked him and after they spread rumors and after they threatened him. He said, "But I prayed Now strengthen my hands. Yeah, I'm nervous. Yeah, I'm scared. Yeah, this is frustrating. God, strengthen my hands. But that's not even the thing that you must do. I want to show you in just a minute what you must do. And again, I believe that this could change everything for you. Those great decisions that you make on a Sunday will follow you on a Monday and a Tuesday and on a Wednesday. This principle could change everything for you. And it's not mind-blowing. It's not going to be something that you're going to go, I never even thought about that. It was just something that Nehemiah did that allowed him to lean in, to build something great, to pursue God with great people. In verse 3, he says this, I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. There is something in your life that you need to complete, that you need to focus on, that you need to address. And when you address it, it'll be a great work. And you will find that your addressing of it will lead you to a different trajectory in your life. Because you addressing it will actually lead you to pursuing the God that loves you. Nehemiah understood this. He even takes it further. He asks this question out loud. He says this, why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? Why should the work stop? What benefit is it for me to pause and to respond on social media to that? What benefit is it to me to pause and to interact in this way that I know will just waste the time that God has given me to focus here? I'm doing a great work. I cannot go down. I cannot go down. Now here's what's interesting about this. You hear this at first and you go, okay, doing a great work. You say it a couple of times, and maybe it starts to build in you and fill in you, and then you're like, now you're Tony Robbins. You want to say it to everybody. You're doing a great work, and you're doing a great work, and you're doing a great work. And by the time we're done today, you're going to say it a few times in your heart and in your mind. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot go down. And we'll get into the details of that in just a minute. But there's this assumption that comes along with it, that once I make a decision, everything's going to be great. Man, Sunday was fantastic. Got baptized, invited a friend, or that friend showed up, or I'm that friend that showed up, and the rest of the week is going to be great. And then Monday comes and we go, oh, you mean the struggle is still present, the temptation is still there, the tension is still pressing upon me. Often we feel like when we make solid decisions that everything else is just going to fall away, but it's not true, is it? You make that one decision, you have to make that one decision again and be consistent in that decision. Nehemiah understood this. Because in verse 4, Nehemiah says this, 4 times they sent me the same message. 4 times they sent me this message. And each time I gave them the same answer. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Hey, come and meet us at this city. Doing a great work. I can't come down. Hey, how about we have coffee at the Queen Bean? Hey, I'm doing a great work. I cannot come down. How about we meet for dinner and I'll buy you a steak? Doing a great work. I cannot come down. Here's what was happening in this moment. Nehemiah is saying yes to God and yes to the great work that God has laid in front of him. And when Nehemiah says yes to something, that means he's saying no to something else. And the same thing is true for you. When you say yes to something, you're saying no to something, right? Here's a few examples. Let me put some pictures up on the screen. For those sports fans out there, when you say yes to your team, you're saying no to the other teams. And don't give me this nonsense that if you're a baseball fan, you're an Angel and a Dodger fan. Please. In fact, let's pause for a moment, and I just want to ask you to repent. You cannot cheer for both teams. It's impossible. It's sinful, all right? It's in the Bible somewhere, all right? First hesitations or something like that, all right? But you know that when you're cheering for one team, you're not cheering for another. Or think about when it comes to politics and voting. When you vote for one person, you're not voting for another. You're saying yes to one, and you're saying no to another. If you're a Republican, you're saying no to Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you're saying no to Republicans. If you're an independent, you don't matter. But I'm kidding. What about relationships? When you're saying yes to commitment, you're saying no to selfishness, right? You're saying no to what you want to do. You're saying yes to what do we do together. Or what about kids? These are my kids. When you say yes to kids, you're saying no to money. And I wouldn't trade my kids for anything. When I said yes to kids, I'm saying yes to raising and developing leaders who love Jesus and love people. And here's what's fascinating about this story. If Nehemiah had come down off the wall, they would have taken his life. And there is something that you need to do in your life. There is something that you need to focus on. There is something that you need to block everything out and lean in on. And if you don't do it, it has the potential to ruin you. I don't know what it is. You do. And if you don't lean in on it, it has the potential to ruin you. And Nehemiah knew this about the thing that God had laid before him. And what I love about this story is that there's three things I think that we need to just highlight for a moment. The first is this. Nothing miraculous took place. There wasn't like a cloud from heaven that surrounded the city while they built the wall and you heard the angels sing and play horns, and while they were building they were singing Kumbaya. Like, that didn't happen. Nothing magical happened in this story. Nehemiah didn't snap his fingers and then they all just disappeared. What happened in this story is something that you and I can do. And it's this. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. So what might it be for you? What might it be for you? Is it your marriage? Maybe you're not married and you've built a great family. You have a great spouse. But maybe it's time for you to take a step forward and make an honest man out of him or an honest woman out of her. Maybe it's time for you to go, I want this commitment to be lifelong, I want to get rid of my parachute. I don't want to bail out of this thing. And so maybe you need to consider what it looks like to actually become one in the eyes of God. Now, everybody's welcome here. Whatever story you have is welcomed here. But you need to know, and what I need to know, is that Jesus says, I'm okay with you not being okay, but I'm also okay with you wanting to be okay. And so maybe it's marriage. Maybe it's commitment. Maybe it's relationship. Maybe it's parenting for you. I know being a parent is hard. Being a parent is hard because it's different than how you were raised. And maybe that's good, maybe that's not so good. The environment might be different. Sometimes I know moms feel like they're just ruining their kids. Dads, I know sometimes we just pull back and we think, well, we'll let mom deal with all like the compassionate mercy stuff, and we'll be the ones that teach them how to start a mower and teach them how to plant things and cook things. And your kids need both of you. Whether you're in a relationship or you're co-parenting and you're in maybe a different relationship, your kids need both of you. And maybe tonight you just need to sit down next to your kid's bed and put your hand on their head and say, I'm doing a great work. And I cannot go down. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe for you, there's something that just keeps pressing up against you. And maybe Easter Sunday, or maybe today was the day that you said, no more. God, I'm saying yes to you and no to this. But then Monday came and, they're sitting by your bed, or the phone number's ready to go, or whatever it might be. What you need to be reminded of and what you need to remind yourself of is you're doing a great work. When you say yes to God and no to your addiction, you're doing a great work. Don't go down. Don't go down. Maybe you were baptized. Baptism is a great decision. Continue to make those great decisions. We as a church are a resource for you. We offer First Step, which is next week. It's an opportunity to meet Ian and some of our leaders. We have Discover and Next Steps, which allows you to take the next steps in your faith. We have connection groups. But they don't work if you don't say yes to them. And that's why we offer them, because we want to see you continue to grow. Not just make one decision, but a continuous amount of decision. Or maybe it's coming to church. Maybe last week was your first Sunday to church, or maybe today is your first Sunday at church. You're doing a great work. Don't go down. Don't go down. I love how God works in my life, because there are moments where I didn't expect it and something happened. And I knew that I was thinking about this particular message today for you and for me last week. And as I left the house early Easter morning, there were 4 Easter baskets out, because we have 3 kids, but my wife really has 4. I'm one of them. And in my Easter basket was a note from my youngest daughter, Riley. And she reminded me of the great work that God has placed in my life. And she wrote, and she's 8, and she wrote this note to me. And I felt it was so appropriate for me, and I feel like it's so appropriate for you. She says, "Happy Easter, Daddy. I want you today to go out there on that stage and baptize all those people." And then the last line is the best. "Show them how we do it. Show them how we do it." And if we took that last line and if we placed it in the story of Nehemiah, it might sound like this: I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. I've said it, but I think it's important for you to say it as well. So if you would, if you're able, could we stand for a moment together? And if you would, with me, could we just say this together? Could we read this together? Are you ready? I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Again, I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. One more time. I'm doing a great work, and I cannot come down. Don't go down. Don't go down. Don't go down. If you would, I'd love to just pray some words over you. God, each person in this room is uniquely made by you. They're not a mistake. They're not an oops. They are uniquely made by you, and there is a great work that they are in the midst of that maybe they're not aware of, or maybe this morning they are aware of and they needed to be reminded to not go down. And so may we be a group of people that leave this place with the words written in our hearts, tattooed across our foreheads: we're doing a great work, and we cannot go down. In Jesus' name, amen.